Speaking about like online services and stuff like that, that's a good segue into our first major topic, and we'll see how long this one will last for. And that has to do with something that we've been talking about more on the streams lately, and why it's kind of a very big deal. And it's surprising me that more people aren't talking about this. And it was a feature Steam rolled out about 2 weeks ago that I think should have been mentioned by everyone on YouTube gaming. That kind of I think shows like their level of understanding game development that they're not talking about, and that is the idea of remote couch co-op. So the idea is basically you can stream your screen and your game to anyone on your Steam friends list, and they're basically able to interact with it just as if they had a second controller or a second keyboard and mouse in the same room as you. So you're essentially tricking the game into thinking that you're playing it locally when you're actually playing it remotely. And I know that doesn't sound like too exciting, but this is a ridiculous huge deal for being able to play games remotely, and more importantly, for giving value to a lot of these games. So over the last 2 weeks, Shark, Mojo, and a few other people and we've been playing games remote couch co-op while streaming, and essentially able to play these games that it was literally not possible to play them remotely or online beforehand. And I don't know about you, Shark, or about the chat, but I think this is a massive deal, not only for Steam, but for independent developers as well.
Yeah, I do think it is absolutely massive because it is so much easier to just do couch co-op into a
Mm-hmm.
game. And up to this point, I've talked to many developers and whatnot, and they're making multiplayer games and whatnot, and they say that they're putting local co-op in their game.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, so it's going to be a single player game then, right?
Yeah, and like that's always been that discussion. I mean, if Mojo's watching this right now, I mean, how many times have we brought up this game is great, but why is it not multiplayer? And again, we've had this discussion many times over on the stream about online connectivity is a very big deal. It is very hard to do right, and maybe near impossible if you try to do this after the game was released. And to Draken's point, yes, it did work. That's what we played last night. And we could possibly get another person for a 3-player remote couch co-op, which sounds insane. But one of the reasons why a lot of developers don't go for online multiplayer is that it's a huge expense, it's a lot of work, and in many cases, it may not be worth it to the developer to spend all that time and money on it. So, with this remote couch co-op play, essentially, in a weird way, it takes the developer out of the equation of their own game, and just allows every game to have online multiplayer. Well, almost. I think it's very important to point out that this really only works for local screen-based games. So, like, if we were trying to play, I don't know, like, pick any multiplayer-based shooter that doesn't allow for split screen view, this wouldn't work on it. Because essentially, the other players are sharing my screen.
Well, that wouldn't be a local co-op
Yeah.
then.
Mm-hmm. It's gotta be a game that has essentially, again, like couch multiplayer to it.
Hmm.
But again, like this is a amazing deal that I think more people need to talk about. And we've been having this discussion, while we were playing these games about what are the implications of this going forward. Because, like you said, Shark, many developers will say, I'm only going to develop local co op. But if this allows those games to be, multiplayer simply for free, what does that mean from a design standpoint?
I mean, it is quite a crazy kind of thing. Like, I mean, I didn't even think about something like this. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, this is like so far outside the box, and it's a huge feature because, I mean, think about it this way. I mean, like, game developers could start just building this into their game
Yep.
to where now it's not just you go through Steam and everything and invite somebody, but they can be like, there's local co-op, a button for local co-op, and then you can hit another button
And
for
pulls up
multiplayer.
the
And this
remote player.
multiplayer button, just links to Steam, pulls it up, and invites that person you invited from your Steam
Yep.
list. And it just connects them, automatically, and also can automatically configure some controls that would be, decent for two different players playing.
Yeah.
Because the thing is when this does go off, both people are sharing a keyboard essentially. Because
Or
if I set my
gamepads
controls,
too.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and because if I set my controls for WASD on my keyboard, and
Mm-hmm.
then Josh sets his for WASD, we're both controlling the same character. It's
Yeah. Yeah, that I think, and again, I don't think that's a Steam issue. I think that's just a local co-op issue, how the game recognizes controllers and what's going on. Because when we played, what was the other game that we played? It wasn't a beat 'em up.
Well, we played one that would let me. I can't remember which one it was, but it let me recognize my actual controller, so I could use my controller and you could use your controller.
I think it was
So
Enter the Gungeon. Was that one?
it's not strictly limited to devices that are linked to your PC.
Yeah, because it's essentially Steam is tricking the game into thinking that all of our peripherals combined are just local.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like, and as you're saying, like, this is going to, I think, be a big deal for developers who develop games local couch. Because not only do you have this feature, but you need to make sure that it's actually up to par. Because I think, like, Fight and Rage is kind of annoying with how it sets up control layouts. Like, we have to, that seems like one of those games we have to like, kind of finagle it every time we want to play it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, but developers could use this, and it would be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Like 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 that one River, what is it, River City Girls or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they seriously, should consider putting out a patch that takes definitely very much advantage of this and
Mm-hmm.
links straight to it, and they can just multiplayer right through it. So you can multiplayer anything through your Steam, friends,
Yep.
and have it all configured and everything to a decent, keyboard mapping and whatnot, and controller mapping right from the start, so you don't have to finagle with it, and
Mm-hmm.
that would be just amazing for that game.
Yeah. And River City Girls, again, was a game that a lot of people complained. Why does this game not have online multiplayer?
And you got to think that, did they know that this was coming? And they specifically left it out because they knew this was coming. Because this released not too long after that, after River City Girls released.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, like, so many, like, party-based games would be amazing for this now. There's that game we played, Bomb something. I spoke to the developer. We had him on for a cast one time. And that game was only local co-op plays, for your buddies on your couch. Well, guess what? It's now an online game.
Mm-hmm.
Completely
Anybody
free.
Steam, right?
What was that?
For anybody on your Steam's list,
Yeah.
friends list.
And again, like, there's so much to unpack with this that it's going to be. I don't. Honestly, I think this would be what Steam should be broadcasting on its store page as a major feature.
Oh yeah. This is definitely like insanely major, and I can't even imagine how much work went into this, because
Mm-hmm.
they had to basically create a way to stream your game, so they had to become their own streaming service like Twitch, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Although they had some of that kind of already in there, but very limited. Then they had to set up a way to recognize controls from both computers or even more than one computer, like three
Mm-hmm.
players, four players, and have the game actually recognize all those inputs
Yeah.
without insane input lag kind of
Yeah.
thing. And that's a huge task right there. And then
Mm-hmm.
they had to get the game just to recognize all of this stuff, and mm,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had to have it where it would it would launch on my computer off of your game without me downloading and installing it.
Yeah, that is the crazy point. Because again, it's kind of like essentially I'm streaming my game to you. So as
Mm-hmm.
long as you have Steam, you essentially have access to my library of local co-op games.
Yep.
And again, like the fact that more people, game journalists and YouTubers aren't talking about this, like to me this is just staggering in terms of them missing the lead here.
Well, maybe this video will go viral because nobody's heard about it except for us, and you'll
Mhm.
get 10 billion views on this,
Mhm.
and this will start the trend of people realizing that this exists. And I don't know how people don't know that this exists.
Yeah. I may actually just cut this part out of the live show and put it up as a separate video just to kind of hedge the bet about more people seeing it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like leave, do like a whole topic and whatnot
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot, but then like just cut out a section of this to let people see just this part.
Mm-hmm. Have the full stream and then just have this section separate because it is like again this is massive not only for Steam but for independent developers because as we've said multiplayer is one of the hardest things to do let alone making it online and there have been
Hmm.
a lot of games released over this decade that kind of failed on launch because they didn't have online multiplayer. If you remember that game we played Full Metal Furies that that game was amazing, but it didn't have the functionality for online multiplayer, or at least good online multiplayer at launch, and it sunk that game royally because of it.
Mm. Yeah,
And,
I mean, and this brings the question. I mean, you know, sh- is this a reason for developers not to put multiplayer in their game and save all that development time and whatnot? Because this is a big thing. Because
mm-hmm,
if they don't, and they were going to, then that means other platforms that they go to will not have multiplayer,
mm-hmm,
and they'll just have couch co-op. So
unless you
then,
play it on Steam.
yeah, which makes Steam the better platform for that, which is what Steam is going for because they're trying to fight Epic with this.
Yeah.
And I don't know why they're not broadcasting it from the ceiling, like you said, because
Mm-hmm.
this is what they're trying to fight them with, and they're not. They don't seem to be, pushing it,
Yeah.
and that doesn't make any dang sense at all.
Yeah. And again, like so many genres benefit from this remote play. Again, we'll talk about beat 'em ups in a few minutes, but party based games, any kind of cooperative based game now essentially has free online development for it. And you brought this up, I think, on one of our live when we were playing this live. Like, do you think this will impact the pricing of games? Because now a developer can say, this $5 game, just local play, it now is free online. Can I charge another $5 to $10 because of that?
I wouldn't say that they can charge more necessarily for it, but like if they do like I was saying, and like put the go through the extra work and
Mm-hmm.
put in something that just ties directly into the system and make it kind of seamless
Mm-hmm.
to where it just will pull up. You click the multiplayer button, it'll pull up your friends list from Steam in the little UI, the overlay,
Mm-hmm.
and then you pick whoever you want to be invited, and then it's done.
Yep.
If they can get it like two button click, done,
Mm-hmm.
seamless, basically, that would be awesome, and that would add a ton of value to the game. I don't know if that would necessarily affect the price of the game, but it could,
Hmm.
depending on what the game is and how dependent it is on multiplayer.
And again, there are a lot of games that, the difference between single and multiplayer is pretty massive. Whether it's from a balancing or a scaling point of view, or simply from enjoying the game. Like, to give you an example, we played that Sniper Elite Nazi Zombie game. I think it was last Saturday. And, like, that was one of those games that single player, it's like, it's okay, but it benefits a lot more from multiplayer. Now that game, or when the re-release, is online multiplayer based, but there are a lot of indie games like that. That the difference between single and multiplayer is huge. Another good one, the twin stick shooter genre. We've played a lot of them on stream, and we've been looking for kind of, the big elevated take on that. Well, now all those games have amazing local multiplayer. They now technically have online multiplayer too.
And I just thought of something else. This pushes games that were only going to be single player kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
into encouraged to be multiplayer. Because I mean, if let's say you just had a side scrolling shooter, made a solid side scrolling shooter, but
Mm-hmm.
what if it's just maybe a week or two worth of work to put local co-op in there, right?
Yeah.
And then another day of worth of work to make the seamless into Steam, in there.
Yep.
So like, a week and a day. And now you're able to add a whole new layer of the gameplay to where you can now like if you get a second player, they can, like let's say that,
Mm-hmm.
for one of your upgrades, you could get a turret that goes around you kind of thing. And now that you can get a second player in there and they can control the turret for you.
Yeah. That game of Sparklight that I just played had a local co-op as well. Well, technically, it now has online co-op.
On Steam.
Yeah. And that could be a very big deal for a lot of games that have like kind of like assist modes like that. That you can design games to allow players to help each other, and again, not necessarily worry about online connectivity or multiplayer. Because there are, like, this is one of those things, this could be its own topic as well. There are a lot of creative ways that you can put multiplayer or some kind of multiplayer based system into a title that's not just, two players, fighting the same bad guys. And,
Mm-hmm.
oh, here's a really good one. There's a game that came out a few years ago called, I think, Clandestine. This was a game where, now this one probably wouldn't be available for local co-op because each player had their own screen, but basically one player was supporting the other one. And there's a lot you can do with kind of innovative multiplayer or co-op systems if you take out the need for developing the online architecture from the developer. And to your point about games that have basic local co-op, if you remember that Blazing Chrome game that we played earlier this year, that's another really strong candidate for a remote co-op play. And again, the developer themselves, I know they're not a huge team, so chances are they wouldn't be able to do an online architecture system. But guess what? They don't need to do that anymore.
I'm sure they could, but
Mm-hmm.
at this, after release, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Like multiplayer isn't necessarily the hardest thing you can put in a game,
Mm-hmm.
but if you're going to put it in there, it needs to be pretty much in there from the beginning because
Yep.
the longer you wait to put it in there, the more systems you're going to have to rebuild based
S-
on it. So,
scale, latency, etc.
so when you're building a multiplayer game, multiplayer is one of the first things you want to lead with in the development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it requires far less work that way because like if you were to go with a game that's already done and you try to put multiplayer in there, you're going to have to rebuild for stuff to work with that for probably about a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So your 3-year development cycle is turned into 4.5 years.
Yeah.
Where if you plan from it from the beginning to have multiplayer,
Mm-hmm.
it would maybe go from 3 years to maybe 3.5 years, or maybe not even that long, but something like that, something along those lines. It would be like an extra year plus for waiting and not planning to put it in there from the beginning.
Yeah. And this is again one of those big complaints a lot of consumers will throw, that why does this simple game have online multiplayer but your game doesn't? And the reason again is usually about when did they start to think about having online multiplayer put into it.
Mm-hmm.
And like that on top of having to change your game engine in between development are like two very big killers of games if you're not properly prepared for it.
Yeah.
And again, so many games can benefit from this. And I think going back to a point that you made earlier, it does raise a very big question about cross platform games. Because again, every store is trying to have its killer feature. Why should I buy your game on Epic when it's available on Steam or GOG or Humble or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And this does kind of create its own little mini Pandora's box in a way. Because what if somebody does release a game both on Steam and Epic, and as you said, they only rely on remote couch play as its multiplayer component? Well,
Yep.
if you buy on Epic, guess what? You're not getting quote unquote online multiplayer.
You're getting the inferior version of the game, even though the game itself is the exact same.
Mm-hmm. But
And I would say this would be a killer feature for Steam, and that's what they were going for. And
mm-hmm.
it's really nice. I really love it. It's amazing, And I didn't even think it was possible, or what didn't think about it, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But I mean, adding this doesn't compensate for all the other bad things they've done, or is still currently doing.
Yeah.
Although I've heard rumors that they are fixing some of that other stuff, like
Mm-hmm.
they are fixing some searchability issues
Yeah.
with for small creators, and I don't know much about it. As far as I know, they haven't released much information on it. It's still in early testing, and I've heard one developer praise it up and down. But I mean,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's they definitely need to work on that, along with many other things.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this one feature doesn't fix all the negative things they have, but it is truly a killer feature that is amazing.
And that more people need to know about and more people need to talk about for sure.
Absolutely.
Let me see. If there's anything else I want to touch on with this. We talked about pricing. We talked about design. I'm trying to. I just had a point that I wanted to bring up and then I just lost it.
You're pulling a Sharky now.
Mm-hmm. No, I've been doing that way before you joined. No,
So I was pulling a Josh.
yeah, definitely. Oh man.
This is just overwhelming, though. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is completely a game changer, and I just can't believe nobody's talking about it.
Yeah. I think the point that I was trying to think about, like as you said, like this doesn't, erase all the problems with Steam. And we get on that topic, that's another 30, 40 minutes. But
Mm-hmm.
it is something that is entirely unique to the platform that, the benefits of it, I think, at this point are incalculable for a lot of the independent developers. And,
And, and even super old games. I mean, it's like super like
oh yeah,
games that aren't haven't sold in
10,
ever.
15 years kind of thing.
Yeah, and this just completely changes things for even old games that you already own. So it's not just for developers going forward, or for
Mm-hmm.
developers in the last few years. This is for games from long ago that only had local co-op that are on Steam
Mm-hmm.
that the consumers are getting so much value added to their games and may go back and play their older games that
And it
only had
may
local
also
co-op.
like reignite some of the, some of those games that didn't sell all that well to begin with. How many people didn't buy a game because they didn't have, local co-op to play it with?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I just remembered the final point I want to bring up, and then we'll move on. There are a few, I think, issues with this, or at least we've seen a few things that could be a debatable point. As we already said, it does mean that games that kind of threw together their local co-op mode or their key bindings may need to be adjusted or things like that. But we did encounter some latency while we played it. And the only problem is that we don't know where that issue is. Is it the fact that I was streaming the game to other people and trying to work it like that? Or was it an issue with the service itself? And go
It
ahead.
could have been a combo in between
Yeah.
because it could be that their service is not optimized so that what you were streaming was more than what you needed to stream,
Hmm.
so that it was excess load.
But to Mojo's point, we did encounter this when I played it with Shark and with Eric. Now, of course, I think it was bad when you had your internet issues as well. But the other point, I think this may actually become a factor as well. As we said, only one person needs a copy of that game. So that does raise that issue of I could buy a game for $40, $30, whatever, and then I just literally share that with all my friends, and they can just play the game for free essentially.
Yeah, I mean that's quite a we have to go that in many directions because
Mm-hmm.
there's one direction to question to would your friends even bought that game to begin with, and will this encourage them to buy it afterwards?
Mm-hmm. I
And if they weren't going to buy it, then you're not losing a sale.
yeah
But if they weren't going to buy it and now they buy it, you're gaining a sale.
yeah. I think this is one of those cases where I'm going to be on the optimistic side that the people who are going to make use of this probably weren't going to buy the game to begin with because of the fact that the game didn't have online play.
Possibly. I mean, there's. I mean, we can only speculate on this
Yeah.
because there's no numbers, no info that we can possibly go off of. But like the, I think that even with the value that it could potentially take away,
Hmm.
the value that it adds, I
It
think is
it's worth
greater.
it.
So I mean, maybe you would need to mark up your game by $5 or something so that you can compensate for the sales that you lose and the value that's added.
Hmm.
Maybe, but I don't actually know. But
I
just
think I,
speculation.
yeah. I think right now more word needs to get out about it first, and then kind of see where the chips fall after that.
Yeah, because right now with nobody knowing about it, unless you build it into your game, streamlined. I mean,
Hmm. Here,
it ain't going to add nobody to your game because nobody's going to realize it's there.
here's a little fun thing. How many developers know that it's a thing? Because if you look on any Steam store page that has local co op, it says remote couch or whatever the term they use available. And I'm pretty sure that must have just been a default feature added by Steam. So, how many developers know that their games now technically have online multiplayer?
That I have no idea. Man, it could be all of them, could be none of them, could be 1%, could be anything. I don't know because
Mm-hmm.
I know all of the developers. Well, a lot of the developers that I talk to on a regular basis do know about it,
Mm-hmm.
which are people we see often over here, Tomo and and Ramin and
Yeah.
whatnot. And
Uh, Here is a really good point. I think this is the perfect one to end this section on. I just
uh,
went to the Children of Morta forum, and if you remember, that was a really amazing roguelike that came out, or roguelite that came out earlier this year. That everybody complained that it didn't have online multiplayer to it, just couch co-op. And
mhm.
there's a small thread on their thing, people complain, when can we play this online with friends? Well, guess what? You can play it now online with friends. And I don't think the developers even know about this.
Oh jeez.
Yeah, we need to get this thing. You may be. Let me see. No, you're not on that one. You may be on a different one. But yeah, like this is why this part. I think when this stream is over, I'm gonna cut. I'm just gonna separate this section and post it. So for all the people watching this part, separate. Thanks for watching it. But this is a massive deal for so many games, and we need to shout this out from the rooftops. I think somebody give me Game Newell's phone number. We need to tell them to do more coverage on this.
Yeah, I mean, this is one part where marketing for Steam would be actually a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.